Adam Reed stabbed a hospital technician because he was angry over the amount due on his bill. Now he owes the state 20 years. Martin West made a living by robbing people. His preferred method of attack was to find a dark area and rush a target. He wishes that he hadn't tried pulling off his last job. Police officers were passing by just around the corner. Tracy Glenn liked to party. When she mixed drugs, drinking, and driving together, she wound up in an auto accident that resulted in the deaths of 2 people, a mother and daughter. Tracy's party days have come to an abrupt end. In our society, crime is a fact of life. Over 20,000 people were murdered in the recent year. Over 100,000 forcible rapes occurred, and over 1 million cases of aggravated assault were reported. It's no wonder that close to 2 million people are incarcerated because of their offenses. Some of these inmates carry a silent killer, HIV. As a corrections officer, you protect society from contact with criminals. But you must also protect yourself from bloodborne diseases that may be present in your workplace. Correctional facilities are like small cities. They have many areas and offer daily opportunities for residents and staff to be in contact with each other. Correctional facilities have their share of diseases too. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, created a standard to protect workers against exposure to diseases carried in the blood or bloodborne pathogens. This regulation within 29 CFR 1910 identifies a standard that can lock down bloodborne pathogens. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. It destroys your body's natural ability to fight off diseases. It can develop into AIDS. Not all HIV-positive people develop AIDS. Some simply carry HIV and remain in seemingly good health for years. There is no vaccine or cure for AIDS. More people contract HBV, hepatitis B viral infection, every year than HIV. HBV infects the liver and can lead to chronic liver problems, liver cancer, or death. There is a vaccine for HBV that is effective in immunizing you against the disease. Symptoms of hepatitis B include jaundice, yellowing of the skin or eyes, clay or gray-colored stool, feces, dark urine. A person infected with HBV may not show any symptoms of disease. The hepatitis C virus, HCV, has no effective vaccine or treatment. Around 75% of people infected with it show no symptoms of the disease, but 85% of them will develop chronic liver disease. Only certain bodily fluids carry bloodborne pathogens. Blood, semen or vaginal secretions, sexual contact, fluid surrounding an unborn child, fluid around the heart, lungs, and joints, any body fluid or tissue containing visible blood. The following bodily fluids cannot transmit the diseases unless they contain blood: sweat, tears, saliva, urine or feces, stool, vomit, mucus such as nasal secretions and sputum. Jason Mack is serving out a life sentence for murder. Driving around late one night, Jason decided that he needed to pick up some money. He climbed the fence and forced his way into the home of Tom Henderson. Then he stabbed the 46-year-old accountant to death and robbed him. You don't know if Jason carries a bloodborne disease or not, but you must take caution when dealing with any prisoner, or even a fellow employee, if you are faced with exposure to blood or bodily fluids. Many bloodborne pathogens are transmitted by blood and bodily fluids. They can enter your body through the smallest break in your skin or your eyes, nose, or mouth. Exposure in the work setting is defined by 4 instances: pricks by contaminated needles, cuts or deep scratches by objects covered with blood or potentially infectious material. Splashes of blood or potentially infectious material entering the eyes, the nose, or the mouth. Having a broken area of the skin, such as cuts or breaks from dermatitis or acne, come into contact with blood or potentially infectious material. Remember, being exposed to blood or bodily fluids does not mean that you are infected. In order for diseases to infect you, a large dose of the virus must enter your bloodstream and overcome your immune system. OSHA's Bloodborne Pathogen standard requires all employers with workers at risk to have a written exposure control plan. This plan should also include the guidelines from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, to provide the best protection. In addition to the OSHA standard, there is the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resource Emergency Act, requiring a designated officer to serve as an advocate for people who have had a potential exposure. Your state and local area also has laws governing exposure and the testing of individuals who have been exposed to bloodborne pathogens. Education is your best defense. Read your facility's exposure control plan for its standard precautions that are designed to protect you from exposure to bloodborne pathogens at work. Protection against HBV is available. It is the only bloodborne pathogen with a vaccine. The vaccine is delivered through a series of 3 shots in your upper arm over a 6-month period. The vaccine is effective for 15 years or more and is provided to you at no cost by your employer. You should check your facility's exposure control plan for rules about isolating bodily substances. Isolate any bodily substance such as blood, urine, feces, or tissue, and handle only with appropriate precautions. Treat all bodily substances as if they were infected. Some substances have visible blood. Any body substance may have blood that you can't see. Always use caution. A person may not look sick or have symptoms, but still be a disease carrier. Simeon Cruz was incarcerated for armed robbery and attempted murder. He held up a fast food restaurant, shot the clerk, and sentenced himself. You see, the clerk Simeon shot has the HIV virus. Simeon was infected without even knowing it when the clerk's blood entered an open cut on his hand. Don't risk exposure to Simeon's or anyone else's bodily fluids. Use PPE. Personal protective equipment is the first barrier against bloodborne pathogens. PPE can include gloves, masks, gowns, safety glasses, or protective eyewear, resuscitation devices, or other equipment. Your department provides PPE and trains you in its use. Be sure PPE fits properly and has no flaws or damage. If an item contacts blood or potentially infectious material, disinfect it, or dispose of it according to your facility's standard operating procedures. Always remove your PPE when you complete your task, and never take your work-issue PPE home. Gloves are the most common form of PPE. They could be single-use disposable gloves or heavy-duty utility gloves. Even though gloves are designed to protect your hands, they can be torn or punctured. So cover any hand cuts you may have before you put on your gloves. Gloves should fit snugly on your hands. Jewelry can cause a glove to rip. Remove your jewelry before you put your gloves on, and pull the gloves as far down over your wrists as possible. If the gloves don't fit properly, request another pair. Single-use gloves are disposable. Don't reuse them. Discard them after use. If they get punctured or torn, remove them as soon as possible and get another pair. If your hands become red, irritated, or develop a rash, you may be allergic to latex in disposable gloves. If this happens to you, notify your supervisor and ask for an alternative, such as low-protein gloves, glove liners, or powder-free gloves. Other gloves, such as utility gloves, may be disinfected and reused. Follow proper cleaning procedures and discard any gloves that are peeling, cracked, torn, or punctured. As you take off gloves, be careful not to touch the outside of the gloves with an exposed hand. With both hands gloved, peel one glove off from top to bottom and hold it in your gloved hand. Slide the fingers of your exposed hand under the edge of the other glove and peel it down towards the fingers. This will wrap the first glove inside the second one. Dispose of the gloves or clean according to procedure. After removing gloves, always wash your hands. Protective eyewear such as goggles or safety glasses block flying objects and spattering fluid from getting into your eyes. Protective eyewear should have side shields. Prescription glasses are generally not protective, but prescription safety glasses can be made. All protective eyewear should include side shields. Reusable eyewear should be washed and disinfected prior to and after each use. Masks are designed to block splashes of body fluids from going into your mouth or nose. They may be disposable or reusable. Dispose of your mask or clean it according to standard operating procedures after each use. Check your mask before you begin your shift. If there are breaks or rips, replace the mask before starting work. If your mask has a face shield attached, make sure you can see through it. Gowns and overalls protect your skin and clothing from potentially dangerous substances. You might not need to use a gown often, but if you do, check it over carefully before work. Rips, tears, or worn spots indicate the need to replace the garment before your shift. Resuscitation devices protect you while you're saving a life. They are designed to create a barrier between you and a victim during mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Victims may expel blood from the mouth or fluid from the stomach while they are being resuscitated. There are other forms of personal protective equipment that may be specific to your job. Pay attention to cleaning and inspection procedures outlined in your exposure control plan. It's a good idea to carry a pair of gloves with you at all times in the event of an unexpected situation. Kelly Sears was arrested for illegal possession of narcotics. She would trade off needles with her friends and shoot up heroin. Kelly is a good candidate for having the hepatitis B virus. How can you protect yourself from catching this disease? When searching a cell, a prisoner, or a locker, be careful to avoid being stuck or cut by hidden needles or sharp objects. Used needles may contain blood. If possible, have prisoners empty their own pockets. If you have to search a prisoner's body, have them remove their own clothes before handing them to you. Wear utility gloves if you move or lift items in a cell search. For searching dark places or underneath furniture, don't use your hands. Use a flashlight and a long-handled mirror instead. If you have to collect evidence, wear cotton gloves over your disposable gloves. Place the evidence in a clearly marked plastic bag and seal it with evidence tape. Bloody items can be air-dried on a rack prior to placement in plastic bags for storage. Follow your department policy for proper disposal of items when they are no longer needed. If you must collect syringes or other sharps, handle them by the barrel or handle. Do not cap, bend, or break needles. Place needles or sharps in a collection container that is puncture-resistant, leak-proof, sealable, and labeled or color-coded as a biohazard. If someone is cut or there's an accident in the kitchen, practice bodily substance isolation procedures and remove the victim from the kitchen. Be sure to put on approved gloves before touching the victim or potentially infected objects. Clean all blood or tissue off countertops, silverware, and dishes. Use an industrial-strength disinfectant or water and bleach mix to clean any food preparation areas that may have been splashed with fluid. When you're handling laundry, watch out for needles or sharps that may have been included in the wash. You also need to look out for clothes or linens that may have been contaminated with blood or other bodily fluids. If you're handling the laundry, wear durable rubber gloves. Check the gloves for cracks, tears, or punctures before your shift begins. This can be a very hazardous environment. In the event of an accident, practice bodily substance isolation and wear appropriate safety gear before cleaning. Hand washing is your #1 protection against infection. If you get blood or other bodily fluids on your hands, the faster you wash it off, the better your chances of avoiding infection. Some people think that wearing gloves means they don't have to wash their hands. That's not true. Always wash hands with plenty of soap and hot running water as soon as possible, even if you wear gloves. Use a waterless hand wash solution only as a temporary measure. You must still wash your hands with soap and hot running water. Here's a general procedure for washing your hands. Wash your hands thoroughly for at least 10 to 15 seconds. Wash under and around any rings, between each finger and above your wrists. Thoroughly rinse your hands under hot running water, lather, and rinse again. Shake excess water off your hands and pat them dry with a paper towel. Use the paper towel to turn off the faucet and discard the towel in the wastebasket. Clean body armor or riot gear by removing the vest while wearing gloves. Spot clean contaminated areas with soap and water, followed by disinfectant. If the vest is soaked with blood, follow the manufacturer's cleaning instructions. Clean contaminated leather gear, such as belts or boots, by rinsing them off with a damp cloth and then using saddle soap. Clean contaminated metal gear by washing with soap and then spraying with a disinfectant. Cleaning contaminated weapons is also simple and basic. Because different weapons require different cleaning procedures, ask your on-duty supervisor or armorer if you are unsure of the cleaning procedure. As a general rule, decontaminate all equipment and environmental surfaces as soon as possible after contact with blood or potentially infectious materials. Spills should be cleaned first. Cover the area with absorbent material to prevent spreading. Clean the area with a disinfectant solution provided by your facility and recommended by the CDC. Start at the outer edges of the spill and allow the disinfectant to absorb inward. While wearing gloves, pick up the material and place it into a biohazard bag for disposal. After cleanup is finished, disinfect mops and any other cleaning equipment. Garbage contaminated with blood or potentially infectious materials must be disposed of according to state medical waste regulations. These are specified in your exposure control plan. Waste bags and containers might contain hidden needles and other infectious materials. Only touch the outside of these containers. Never reach inside or tamp the trash down with your hands. Instead, hold the top of the bag and shake waste down. Remember to carry bags away from your body. Use a broom and dustpan or tongs to pick up broken glass or plastic, not your hands. Your exposure control plan lists specific procedures to follow when dealing with contaminated uniforms and clothing. Special laundry services or facilities are usually provided. Contaminated articles may be rinsed clean, then laundered normally with soap using a standard washing machine. Larry Kalos was convicted of credit card fraud. Before he was apprehended, Larry was living the good life. He ran up credit card bills totaling $50,000. He supplemented his high-roller lifestyle by sleeping with numerous prostitutes. His actions placed him at high risk for catching a bloodborne disease. After he was jailed, Larry went ballistic. He could not handle confinement. He committed suicide by slicing himself up in his cell. Blood was everywhere. When you arrive at a scene that may put you into contact with potentially infectious materials, such as an accident, illness, or an assault, quickly assess your need for PPE. If there is blood or infectious material present, you need to wear gloves. If the fluids are on the floors, walls, or ceiling, then you would wear a face mask or eye protection. If there is a lot of fluid or a potential for splatter, then adding a gown or protective suit to your PPE might be appropriate. Wear gloves if you're dealing with a bleeding prisoner, contaminated materials, or if you anticipate resistance. If the prisoner is combative or violent, you may need a mask and eye protection. What if there's no time to put on protective equipment and an exposure occurs? That's when your designated officer and a post-exposure medical treatment program go to work. Prisoners live in a highly structured environment surrounded by law enforcement officers. But accidents, illnesses, violence, and drug abuse can be daily occurrences. No matter how careful you are, no matter how many precautions you take, you might still be exposed to contaminated bodily fluids. Your department's program for exposure reporting and medical follow-up is vitally important to you. The most important thing to remember if you're exposed is to remain calm. Panic only makes matters worse. Wash the exposed areas with soap and water or with a waterless wash solution. If contact occurs in the eyes or any exposed mucous membrane, flush the area with large amounts of water immediately. In the event of skin exposure, remove contaminated clothing and place in a marked plastic bag until it can be laundered. Shower with soap and water and change into clean clothes. As soon as possible, report any exposure event to your designated officer. Give as much detail about the source and type of exposure as you can. The designated officer documents the event and ensures that you and the source of exposure receive the proper blood work. The designated officer will inform you of the test results as they become available and discuss the need for any additional treatment or consultation. If the source individual is diagnosed with an infectious disease, the medical facility giving the diagnosis must inform you through your designated officer. Remember, exposure does not mean infection. The chances of becoming infected after an injury with a contaminated sharp is remarkably low. If you haven't had a hepatitis B vaccine, the chance of infection with HBV is between 6 and 30%. The chance of infection with hepatitis C is between 3 and 10%. For HIV, the chance is less than 0.5%. Far greater risks face you working in a correctional facility. However, the risk is real. The diseases are out there, but the chances of becoming infected are low. Place caution and procedure between you and bloodborne pathogens to protect yourself from HBV, HCV, and HIV.